All right, good afternoon. This morning, the Secretary General spoke at the General Assembly's observance ceremony on the commemoration of UN Day. He pointed out that 75 years ago, amidst the rubble and ruins of the Second World War, world leaders did the audacious. He noted that many previous attempts to secure peace and progress through international cooperation had collapsed, yet they dared to try again, and they succeeded. Mr. Guterres said that at its birth, the UN was a symbol of global unity. Today, it is the epicenter, and our mission is more important than ever. He emphasized that international cooperation is the only way to defeat the pandemic, the climate emergency, rising inequality, and the spread of hatred. He highlighted that we measure the success of the UN by the lives we save, the suffering we ease, the peace we build, the opportunities we create, and the rights we protect, adding that we will never, ever give up on our mission and in our work to fulfill the enduring vision of the Charter. And this is... Oh, okay, great. Okay, thank you. You will have noticed also at daybreak, we issued a statement in which the Secretary General said he was very encouraged by Japanese Prime Minister Suga Yoshihide's announcement of Japan's commitment to get to net zero emission by 2050. Japan, the world's third largest economy, joins the growing group of major economies committed to leading by example in building a sustainable, carbon-neutral, and climate-resilient economy by 2050. The Secretary General said he looks forward to the concrete policy measures that will be proposed and implemented to reach this goal, adding that he is confident that Japan will also assist in developing countries to reach this goal, including through technological assistance in its public and private finance for renewable energy. And in a message delivered to the World Health Summit in Berlin via pre-recorded video, the Secretary General said that the first hard lesson of the current COVID-19 pandemic is that we were not prepared for it. He underscored that universal health coverage is the path to high quality, equitable, and affordable health care, adding that we need health systems that work before we face an outbreak of something more contagious or deadly than COVID-19. Adding that, he also pointed out that we are not powerless. If we follow the science and demonstrate unity and solidarity, we can overcome the pandemic. The Secretary General underlined the need for global solidarity at every step of the way, and that the virus' deadliest allies are misinformation and disinformation. And on Saturday, our friends in Honduras deposited the 50th instrument of ratification or accession to the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. As a result, the treaty will enter into force on January 22nd, 2021. The Secretary General commended the states that have ratified the treaty and saluted the work of civil society, which has been instrumental in facilitating the negotiations and ratifications of the treaty. Entry into force is a tribute to the survivors of nuclear explosions and tests, and many of whom advocated directly for the treaty. The Secretary General added that the entry into force of this treaty is a culmination of a worldwide movement to draw attention to the catastrophic humanitarian consequences of any use of nuclear weapons. It represents a meaningful commitment towards the total elimination of nuclear weapons, which remains the highest disarmament priority for the United Nations. The Secretary General looks forward to carrying out the functions assigned to him by the treaty. And we issued a number of other statements over the weekend, one expressing horror and shock at the attack on a school in Cameroon's southwest region. The Secretary General urged Cameroonians to conduct a thorough investigation to ensure those responsible are held accountable. We also took note of the announcement of the provisional results of the presidential elections in Guinea and reiterated our call for all actors to settle dispute through established legal mechanisms and prevent violence. And we also took note of the agreement to normalize relations between the Republic of Sudan and Israel, and the Secretary General adding that he hopes the agreement will further cooperation, enhance economic and trade relations, and bring about new opportunities to advance peace and economic prosperity in the wider Horn of Africa and the Middle East regions. And you heard Mr. Mladenov briefing the Security Council this morning on the Middle East peace process, saying that the pandemic stretches on, its consequences accumulate. Palestinian and Israelis alike are feeling the effect. He's particularly concerned about the spread of the virus in Gaza and the long-term damage to the Palestinian economy and social cohesion, including impacts on education for the next generation. His full statement was shared with you. Our good friend Geir Peterson, the special envoy for Syria, has just left Damascus. Mr. Pedersen had comprehensive discussions with Deputy Prime Minister, Foreign Minister and Expatriate Affairs Walid al-Mualem. Mr. Pedersen touched upon all issues related to Security Council Resolution 2254, including the Constitutional Committee, and he said he will continue the consultations with the. He said he will continue to consultations with the opposition Syrian Negotiation Commission, and Mr. Pedersen will brief the Council via video tomorrow, Tuesday. And the Libyan Political Dialogue Forum convened its first virtual meeting today. The direct in-person meeting of the forum will kick off on November 9th in Tunis. The UN mission welcomed 75 Libyan participants to the first virtual meeting of this dialogue. Participants were briefed on the intra-Libyan economic and military tracks facilitated by the mission. The UN mission as well on the human rights and international humanitarian law tracks. The overall objective of the forum will be to generate a consensus on unified governance framework and arrangements that will lead to holding national elections in the shortest possible time frame in order to restore Libya's sovereignty and democratic legitimacy of Libyan institutions. Quick update from Chile, where our country team says they have welcomed the culmination of the constitutional plebiscite, calling it a civic act of historical importance in which citizens have expressed their opinion in favor of the I approve option, which opens the process of formulating a new constitution for the country. The high participation and civic spirit demonstrated are proof of Chile's strong commitment to democracy. We at the United Nations call for the continuing of the constitutional process, strengthening democratic values, equal participation of women and men, respect for the rights of freedom and opinion and expression as fundamental principles. The statement from the UN country team is available on the internet. Quick note from Mozambique, where humanitarian colleagues inform us that since October 16th, at least 10,000 newly internally displaced people have arrived by boat in Pemba, in Cabo Delgado's provincial capital, in the north of the country. The displaced people, mostly women and children, are fleeing the ongoing conflict in the region. In support of the government-led response, we, along with our partners, have provided food and water for more than 5,000 people over the last few days. Humanitarian partners have also put in place measures to prevent possible disease outbreaks, specifically diarrhea and COVID-19. They're installing temporary latrines, hand-washing facilities, and they are distributing face masks and setting up an emergency medical tent. The humanitarian situation in Cabo Delgado has rapidly deteriorated in the last 10 months due to the conflict and violence. More than 300,000 people are now displaced in need of life-saving assistance. The humanitarian rapid response plan for Cabo Delgado has received around 60% of the $35.5 million requested. And just an interesting report we saw from UNEP, which will ring true to many of us who've traveled. Millions of used cars, vans, and minibuses exported from Europe, the U.S., and Japan to the developing world are of poor quality, contributing significantly to air pollution and hindering efforts to mitigate the impacts of climate change. That's according to a new report by UNEP, the UN Environment Program. The report shows that between 2015 and 2018, 14 million used vehicles were exported worldwide. Some 80% of those went to low and middle-income countries, with more than half going to Africa. UNEP said developed countries must stop exporting vehicles that fail environmental and safety inspections and are no longer considered roadworthy in their own countries. The report also calls for the adoption of minimum quality standards that will ensure that used vehicles contribute to cleaner, safer fleets in importing countries. Mr. Bays and Ms. Leder.
I have two questions. First, a request. Do you think it's possible that we could have a stakeout from Mr. Pedersen following the excellent recent examples of Stephanie Williams and Martin Griffiths?
Yes,
we haven't spoken to him for literally months and months and months.
Fine.
Okay, so questions. Is the Secretary-General at all concerned that Egypt might be planning to blow up the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam?
You know, I think for the Secretary General, her position is one of supporting the ongoing efforts of the chairperson of the African Union, Cyril Ramaphosa. who is encouraging the parties to reach a mutually beneficial agreement. The Secretary General calls on all concerned countries to take concrete steps to finalize an agreement in the spirit of goodwill, consensus, and compromise. The dam can become an important instrument of cooperation and partnership between Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan as they strive towards a peaceful, prosperous future for their own people.
And has the Secretary General any comments on the growing spat between Turkey and France? Latest development, Turkish president calling for a boycott of French goods.
No particular comment on that. Edie.
Thank you, Steph. A couple of questions. First, on Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Nagorno-Karabakh, the Secretary General welcomed this third attempt to get a ceasefire. And today, the Armenians and Azerbaijanis were accusing each other of breaking it. Does the Secretary General have any further comment?
Yeah, I mean, we welcome the agreement that was announced yesterday. I think we're obviously very deeply concerned by the reports that there are already ceasefire violations shortly after the parties agreed to implement their commitments for a third time in recent days. It is very important that the parties fully implement their agreement, and he expects them to abide by these commitments. I think what cannot be overlooked is the humanitarian situation in the conflict area, and it is important that all ensure safe and unimpeded access to humanitarian workers, delivery of humanitarian assistance, and services to civilians in and around the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict zone.
Secondly, there were, again, massive demonstrations in both Belarus and in Thailand against the governments. Does the Secretary General have any comment or any suggestion to those government leaders?
Well, I think in Belarus, we have been very clear from the start that, first of all, people have a right to demonstrate peacefully, that security forces should always show restraint, and that parties in Belarus should engage in a democratic dialogue. And as far as Thailand is, I think that the message is basically the same, and it's a global message that people have a right to demonstrate, and that governments, wherever they are, in any country, should listen to the voices of the people. Mr. Sato, and then we'll go to the screen.
Thank you, Stéphane. So, to my knowledge, the United States is supposed to withdraw from Paris Accord early next month. So, how worried does the Secretary General see this situation, and what action will Secretary General take in order to accelerate the climate action more in the world?
Well, the date you mentioned is not a surprise, right? This is part of a legal procedure that was initiated almost a year ago when the intention to withdraw was deposited by the United States. The Secretary General is very focused on mobilizing not only governments, and we saw the brave and very ambitious announcement made by the Prime Minister of Japan yesterday. Others have made similar agreements. We are focused on mobilizing not only governments at every level, national and state and local authorities, civil society, business community. I mean, the Secretary General regularly speaks to business leaders, fund managers, and so on, youth groups, and the Secretary General will continue that policy tomorrow and as the days move forward. Okay, I unfortunately do not have my phone with me, so I'm unable to monitor the chat. So if you have a question, wave, and I see Abdelhamid. Go ahead.
Thank you. I have two questions.
Go ahead.
The United States now is considering. Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
I am speaking.
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Oh. The United States now is considering declaring Amnesty International and the Human Rights Watch as anti-Semite organizations. What is your intake on that? And I have a second question.
Okay, we've seen the press reports. We're not going to comment on something, comment specifically on something that has not yet happened. I would refer you to what the Secretary General has said in the past about the important work that human rights organizations do and that civil society organizations do. But obviously, the only thing I've seen is I've read things in the media. I've not seen any official announcement. Your second question.
My second question, Mr. Mladinov, in his speech, he repeated that Israel is going ahead with plans to build 5,000 units in occupied Palestinian territories. He also mentioned this situation of Maher al-Akhras, who's been almost 90 days on hunger strike. However, Israel even chose not to mention in the speech of the Israeli ambassador the settlement of the what you can do appealing to Israel to stop the settlement activities, and they have never stopped it again and again and again.
Well, you know, each permanent representative or senior official who addresses the council from a member state is free to say whatever they want. We've stated our position. It's very clear, and we've made that position known both privately and publicly to Israeli authorities. Okay, I have my phone back, so my colleagues can tell me who's going on. So, Iftikhar, please go ahead.
Thank you, Steph. Following up on James' question regarding French-Turkish tensions, does the Secretary General have any comments on the derogatory remarks made by President Macron about Islam?
Look, I haven't read the full remarks, and I'm not going to do an analysis, something I haven't read fully. As a matter of principle, the Secretary General has always called for the respect of freedom of religion and the freedom of belief anywhere in the world. Okay, Gloria.
About the Cameroon and about the school that was destroyed. Was it from the German part of Cameroon, from the French part of Cameroon, or the English part of Cameroon where the school was destroyed? And are those European interests now helping on peacekeeping there in those areas where the school was blown up? And maybe that European country that's involved that are close to the Cameroon where they're speaking German, French, or English will help to rebuild the school. That's my question.
My understanding of the colonial history of Cameroon is that it had been a German colony. Then, after the First World War, given in trusteeship or some other colonial legal term to France and Great Britain. The attack took place, as far as I recall, in the English-speaking in regions where there is a majority of English speakers. Regardless of where it took place, it is one of these situations where the words that we use to condemn these attacks cannot live up to the actual horror of what happened. And anyone, and it is one of these cases where we run out of words. Okay. Any other questions? Oui, Madame.
Sorry. Announced that he was the winner of the election in Guinea. Is the Secretary General worried about what could happen and had already happened, actually?
Well, you know, first of all, it is not up for us to certify the elections. We saw that the results were announced. Our concern is related to some of the violence we have seen. What is very important in Guinea and any other countries where there are elections and then disputed elections is that the recourse be made through the existing legal and constitutional framework while those processes are going on, that there is an appeal for calm, not only from us, but more importantly from leaders on the ground. Okay, unless I see a question, or someone waving their hands or opening their mics, I will leave this wonderful podium to Mr. Varma.